Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about why quads are often de-emphasized on the conjugate system. Now, of course, people see me standing there and like, Jason, you have jacked quads. But I don't really do that much quad work, right? I really don't. And my quads are probably going to continue to grow. They're going to continue to grow. And there's a couple of things that I want people to think about with all of this. Okay, there's a couple things that you need to think about. When you look at the generalities of the conjugate system, what do we see? We see a heavier focus on posterior chain. But what you also need to remember is that you tend to see a lot of sumo pulling, which works more quads. We see tons of deficit pulling, tons of speed boxes. And when you look at that at its very core, a lot of this is going to work more quad than you would think of. It's going to work a lot of quad. And I'm not saying things like the hip belt squats and stuff aren't good, but I'm going to get to in a minute why they may not even be necessary at all if you're really doing this training like a real athlete does. But back to the other point, if you're doing the legitimate volume on speed boxes with a wide stance, you're doing either deficit deadlifts or sumo deadlifts for the speed work, you're getting a lot of quad work. Especially if you start adding in any sort of supplemental volume, say on the max effort day. Like on this one here, these were from a max effort day. I'm doing snatch grip deadlifts. We have a deeper angle. Right? We're going a lot deeper on a snatch grip deadlift than a conventional deadlift. You're going to get more quad involvement. You're going to get more quad involvement. Also, when you look at the squat style used in this system with the box squatting, it teaches you to learn to squat with more vertical shins even when the box is gone, and it teaches you to use a very, very wide stance. Well, why does that matter? Because we get other muscles involved. Now, the research and data out there has shown, and anyone who wants to argue this, I've had someone say, can you link stuff? No, just go to something like Knuckles' blog. Go to Stronger by Science and look at his stuff about quad dominant squatting or stance width and quad. This is easy to find. He has tons of links. And I won't remember that by the time this video goes up. I think people forget also a lot of these videos, I film these 5 to 6 weeks before they actually go up, before they're uploaded to you. So this material is very, very easy to find, though. The data shows you that quads get worked just as hard on a very wide stance squat. Okay, they are worked just as hard. That's what the experts and researchers looking at it are noting. That bodybuilder conventional wisdom is not correct. But what they do is they allow you to use more hip. And in some cases, slightly more glute. Well, what does that mean? That means you get more muscles involved to help the quads. The quads get worked just as hard. Now people say, but if other muscles are involved, the quads would work less with the same weight and reps on the bar. That's true. Okay, if you did 500 pounds for 3 reps, or 5 reps, or whatever, yes, the quads would get worked less with that stance width. But it would also be easier. The reason the quads would be worked less is because the weight wouldn't feel as heavy. You should be able to lift more weight. It shouldn't be 500 for 3. It should be like 520 for 3 or 525 for 3 or whatever it is. Whatever your difference is. Right? Because if you can do that with a narrow stance and you've built your hips and everything up, you should be able to do even more weight when they actually get involved more because the quads are doing the same amount of work. The other muscles are now adding to the weight. So you should be stronger. You should be able to lift more weight, not the same. And if you only lift the same, that means you're still very, very probably quad dominant and those other muscles are stupidly weak and you need to develop them. You're limiting yourself. You got to remember, hips matter a lot in sports. Start talking about athletic performance, training like an athlete. Having strong, powerful hips is the best possible thing you could do. Look at how much hip extension and hip strength is involved in every single sport on earth. I don't care whether it's jumping, sprinting, pivoting out on a field, kicking someone in kickboxing. Look at the amount of hip involved in any of those things. Even grappling. Watch guys who grapple. Watch grappling sports. How much hip ends up being involved, especially in certain positions. Right? You better have strong hips. In other words, this means that quads become less of the limiting factor. The quads don't get used less, they're just less of a limiting factor. Any given quad strength, you're probably going to be able to squat more weight. And also, a lot of the deadlifting that we do is very specific to the quads in similar angles. So you have all of that, but then what about the rest of the conjugate system? People are only looking at the weight training side. What else does conjugate rely very heavily on? Oftentimes sled pulls, sled drags, prowler work. In fact, I ordered a sled. I'll have that sled and be using my sled well before this video goes up. Actually, I bought a sled. I've got a game plan for programming it in. Okay. How much do your quads get worked on sled work? A lot. And it's easy to recover from. Okay. It's very easy to recover from. Very high volumes. It's like doing very, very high rep squats with no eccentric rep. With no eccentric, it's easy on recovery, and you can do tons of volume. Now, before people say, yeah, but the eccentrics matter, you're getting eccentric loading on the box squat. You already have your eccentric loading. Now we're doing straight work. Okay. All that sled work will hypertrophy the quads. And it will specifically hypertrophy them for concentric movement. It's what you need to explode out of a squat. Sticking point where the quads help you in the squat, which is, a few inches out of above parallel, coming out of the bottom. Okay, will be developed from the sled work. What about box jumps, plyometrics? If you're running this system to its fullest extent, you're doing some box jumps, right? Yeah? Of course you are. So if we're doing box jumps, which has an explosive component, training the quads through, again, yet another completely different energy system. Hitting upper threshold fibers, the ones that we need to power through a heavy squat. All right. If you're training like an athlete while using this system, your quads are getting worked. Okay, you're getting your normal squatting work and even the eccentric loading from the box squats, especially your speed boxes, from your deficit deadlifts, from your sumo pulls, all this stuff. We're working the quads. We are working the quads. And the supplemental quad work that you would add in some cases can be disregarded largely when the other stuff comes into the equation. Do you really need step ups and hip belt squats and stuff if you're doing the other stuff? Say probably not. Because if we go the other way, what are we doing? We're now doing box jumps, which again, upper threshold fibers repeatedly. Because when you jump and you explode hard on a jump, it's impossible to jump non-explosively. Powerful concentric contraction hitting upper threshold fibers. So we're hitting that end of the spectrum. Then if you're dragging a sled, hitting that whole stamina end, which should give you a ton of hypertrophy. So when you start looking at this in its totality, our quads are getting 3 distinctive types of training. Quads are being worked. You're going to get jacked quads. And then on top of it, the squatting that we do allows a lot of other muscles to come into play to the point to where the quads are probably not going to be a limiting factor. They're along for the ride. They're a primary mover and they matter, but they are more along for the ride at that point. because we're getting so many other muscles involved. Therefore, people tend to focus on those other muscles more, because that will also carry over to your deadlifting. Alright guys, well that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.